If you've ever moved to a new country or even just spent a few months living somewhere where the language and culture are unfamiliar, you've had a glimpse into the dislocation experienced by many migrants and refugees. But as political debates and public fears overwhelm us, it's difficult sometimes to see the human need behind the simple request, "Will you be my neighbour?"
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Well, it's great to have on the line from New Zealand, Pastor Kirsten Oster-Lundqvist. How are you, Kirsten?
I'm doing really well. And yourself over there in sunny Australia?
Yes. Now you're from Denmark originally, is that right?
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I think New Zealand is probably the right place for you because I guess we kind of consider it the Scandinavia of the, Oceania sort of region. Do you find you're settling in there? How long have you been there now?
We've just been here 3 years, and it took me 3 days to fall in love with Wellington. Everybody's complaining about Wellington being so windy, and I'm like, well, that's great. It has fresh air. And Denmark, you might not know, is a country that exports windmills to New Zealand. So I feel right at home here.
Oh, that's good. And there's the ponytail is required for anyone with longer hair, is it? Otherwise, you can't see where you're going. Is that how it works?
There is a style called welly hair, which means I have reduced my hair product bill tremendously.
Oh, okay. That's good. So I think I was chatting with you earlier because you were in Australia earlier in the year, and I chatted with you about writing the article that you wrote for us in Signs of the Times magazine. I sort of got the impression from you that you've travelled around a bit. You've lived in a few different countries. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm one of those nomadic hearts that's kind of taken this whole Adventist movement thing maybe a little bit too far. I've lived in quite a number of countries and continents, and I'm just loving the whole moving around and exploring new places and finding out what life is like there.
Okay. So you're pastoring a church there in New Zealand. Is that what you've been doing elsewhere as well?
Yes. I mean, I've worked 25 years for the Adventist Church, where I've been pastoring, and sometimes it's been church planting, where you start new church groups. Sometimes it's been media and communication work, sometimes radio work. So I've done a little bit of a mixed bag, but tend to come and just work in the Adventist Church in a variety of countries.
Okay, and what are you doing there in windy Wellington in particular?
Well, I'm so privileged that I'm actually leading out a church plant called Capital Church, which is what I kind of describe as a kind of a refuge church in a way. Sounds a bit ominous, but it's basically people who are just passionate about Jesus and truly the whole come as you are. It's a little bit more flexible, I think, than you would have in a Northern European church setting.
Well, what about the culture in New Zealand, like generally, outside the church, just in the street, in the media, in the shops, that sort of thing? What have you found to be similar or different from Europe, where you've been most of the time previously?
Yeah, I think, for me, you're spot on when you're saying there's a bit of Scandinavia in it, because people are a lot more informally dressed. It's more casual. People are more practical, for the weather. You dress for the weather.
Yep.
You just are more practical. But what has really struck me as a huge difference is how friendly people are in Wellington.
Wow.
So I was walking down the street when I came, and this kind of illustrates the point. So I was just walking the first couple of days, and people were smiling to you in the street, and I'm like, what is my button undone? Do I have, is my hair too crazy? Why are they laughing at me? Yep. And it took me some time to realize that people were just friendly in giving a smile and saying kind of like hi with their facial expressions in a way I haven't come across. Get on the bus, and when people leave, they're like, thank you, driver. I'm like, wow, we are being grateful to the bus driver. And then that kind of whole way of just being, giving each other space to actually be different. So when I see women in the 70s with green hair, I'm like, okay, there's space for that too. And that wasn't just a bleached washout. That was like truly green or pink or whatever it is. So wow. I'm really finding that Wellington embraces variety and difference. And I have to say, I really think when you can live in a place that has space for people of difference, then you are able to live a blessed life.
Wow, it kind of sounds like that Wellington has embraced sort of the best of the friendliness of a country town, because it sounds like it in that way, but also the best of the sort of diversity and acceptance of the city all at once. It's a fairly rare combination.
I think it is. I mean, Wellington is small. I mean, we're not going to kid ourselves. It is a small little city.
Yep.
So everything is close. You can walk everywhere. And I think you have that large village, but because it's the capital, you have the arts, and you have the internationalness, and you have the not. What I find is people are not insular the way I've come across in other cities and other places in the world. People are well aware of that there is a world outside of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm. Wow, no, that's really interesting. So you've heard the phrase, culture shock, I imagine. Have you experienced that, like in New Zealand or elsewhere? Or have you seen other people going through that?
I mean, culture shock is basically when your system has a shock when you react to something because it's so foreign to who you are. And I think my biggest culture shock actually is when I go home to my home country.
Oh, really?
And it's that kind of reverse culture shock. I'm so used to being an international Dane that I kind of define what it is to be my own culture. And it's not, it's kind of so mixed by now that I have a bit of a shock when I go home. I'm like, really? This is how we do things? So I'm experiencing more personal, a reverse culture shock, particularly after coming back from my studies when I went back to Denmark. That was a challenge, I think.
Yeah, what is it? What sorts of things are a challenge?
I think there's a challenge when you come to the country where you are originally from. You can also talk about it being a third culture shock. You're a third culture kid because you grow up more outside of your own culture than in your home culture.
Yeah.
And there is just an expectation that, well, if you're Danish, this is how we do things. It's a very homogenous society that I grew up in. And you come back and people have changed. Just the coins are different. I mean, we still have the same currency, but the coins, the slang, you end up speaking like a grandma, even though you're in your 20s. And just the whole, you don't understand the reference to media and personalities, famous people, because you have been gone.
You've been out
and
of the
so
loop.
you come across as sounding unintelligent or uninformed in your own culture.
Wow. So that must spark sort of a thinking within yourself, where do I belong? I've been overseas all this time thinking, well, I'm a foreigner here, so of course of course I don't know everything, but then you go what you thought was home and you don't feel like you belong there either. That must leave you feeling awfully sort of, out of place, dislocated.
Yeah, and I think you are to a certain extent. I mean, I probably have lived more years outside of Denmark than I have inside of Denmark at this point in my life. So you're absolutely right. It is a shock to go back and you have what's called a third culture kid identity, where your life and your home is where your suitcase is. And you kind of, the expensive part of this life is that you get used to all kinds of things and from different cultures that becomes integrated in your own life and in your own daily doings. So I like food from here, from there, and you go like, ooh, I miss this and that. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot of people who have left one country and moved somewhere else struggle more with returning to their home country. And you see that very much in church settings. I think is that microcosmos that exemplifies this, that churches that are set up with a language base that is reflecting of a culture from another country than they are presently residing in, tend to stick with it in a time warp from when they left that home country. And when they go back to that home country and visit similar churches, they're having a shock because they have moved on, whereas an immigrant church tend to just remain in that time warp.
Yeah, I've seen that. I remember growing up in Adelaide, and there was a Polish church there that I used to visit, quite often. Lovely people, lovely stone church. Actually got married there later on. Beautiful architecture. But it was known as being quite a conservative church. When I was 17, I went on a mission trip to Poland, and we were involved in the church there, like right there in the capital city of Warsaw. And, I saw girls running around with miniskirts, and there was a drum kit involved at one stage, and I was like, goodness me, I thought Polish people were very conservative when it came to church worship. What has happened? And it's exactly what you said. The Polish church in in Australia had been caught in a sort of a time warp in some ways, and they'd maintained this sort of time capsule of attitudes and worship styles from, you know, the post-war period, while Poland itself had moved on. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
It is exactly what I'm saying, and I know that Polish church, because Polish language is so different than English, and when you have a very different language, it tends to become a more insular capsule of a time warp than if you have languages. If you have an easier access to the language in your new country, you get better connected, and you tend to move more with the times. But we've seen that over and over again, and
Sure.
and I think it's beautiful where people want to keep their culture alive, because that's part of the richness of what makes us us. But I also think it's a reality check for those of us who are immigrants to actually, you know, we are here. Those of us who are economic immigrants have chosen to move to another country. And it is our duty to understand and learn about the culture we are moving to and moving into.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I compromise who I am. I still like my dark rye bread and cheese in the morning. And that's not going to change. But my view of life coming to New Zealand has been tremendously enriched by the choice I made to actually study Te Reo Maori when I came and learn the local language and learn more about the culture and understand part of this land.
Wow. But I mean, you wrote a great article for us in Science Magazine, Kirsten, entitled "Will You Be My Neighbour?" And you made the point in that article that, you know, coming from sort of, you know, white Northern European culture as you do to New Zealand as a sort of a, you know, cosmopolitan, jet-setting, you know, traveller and international worker is, yes, you can relate in some ways to the migrant experience, but someone who has, for example, come to New Zealand as a refugee has quite a different set of experiences to you. Or can you just discuss that, explore that a bit for us?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, I think this is part of the whole discussion that we are seeing in our media, is that people tend to mix up the term immigrant and refugee. We are not the same, and none of us are better than the other, but an immigrant has made a choice. And we've gone through a very rigid visa process, and we coming to a job and all of that. We have made this a choice. For whatever reason, it's a choice. When you are a refugee, that is not a choice. And being a refugee is just, you know, when you look at the definition, it's a person who is forced to flee their country because of violence and persecution.
Yeah. Obviously, Kirsten, there is a choice, but as I remember someone saying to me once, you know, if it's a choice between, you know, run away from your home or die, you do have a choice, but it's not much of a choice. Yeah. Is it really?
No, it's not much of a choice. If you are, but, you know, you also have internally displaced people that, you know, over 41 million people are displaced in their own country around the world. So a refugee, you know, comes to a country from what is called like a refugee allocation quota that is agreed on a global setting. So they might not have chosen to come to New Zealand or to Australia. They might have wanted to go somewhere else. So when you are a refugee, your choices are extremely limited. And if it's my life or die, you know, I think most of us would try to go somewhere else or try to run away.
Even if that's the unknown.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going into the unknown, but I think And we know that many don't even have that strength to be able to do that, to flee their country. So I think, you know, for me, the first thing I have to do as a white Northern European is to recognize that I'm standing from a place of privilege. I cannot describe a refugee's journey because I haven't done it. I have read about it, understood it, but I need to know that my place as an immigrant is as a place of privilege. And as such, I can have empathy with people who are fleeing, and I can talk with them, but I have not felt that on my own body, and I'm grateful for that. But I also have to be very aware of not alienating those who have fled. And I think the debate in the media tends to be we mix it all into one, all foreigners. You know, it's a them and us discussion, and not understanding that there are nuances.
Oh yeah. Wow, no, that's a really good point. So in Australia, obviously, discussions around asylum seekers and refugees have become quite politically, divisive, very politically hot. What's the situation there in New Zealand? What is the quality of the public debate about these issues there?
Yeah, I think, as I wrote in my article, we found the tone of voice in Northern Europe being extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm embarrassed of my own country, Denmark, and how they have been buying into this very right-wing anti-immigration and anti-refugee rhetoric. And it's an embarrassment to me that I'm coming from a country that is now speaking those words, instead of what we like to pride ourselves in was that, well, during Second World War, we helped so many Jews escape because that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't live on that forever.
Yep.
And I think, when I go to visit Australia, I do sense there is a stronger debate that is very much closer to what I experienced in the UK, the US, Northern Europe, than here in New Zealand. Here in New Zealand, it's like, well, we are gonna commit to, after our March 15 terror attack, we're going to commit to take more refugees in.
Wow.
That's what people are saying. It's like, no, we have to take more refugees in. This should not stem it. This should actually say, we are committed to, we want to reach out and be a place of refuge.
Wow, really? So I didn't realise that, because I would have thought, those March shootings, the mosque shootings in Christchurch there, in some ways sort of seems like it could be sort of New Zealand's September 11 moment. But instead of sort of, lashing out or seeking self-protection, you're saying that New Zealand is actually opening its heart even more to migrants?
That's what I'm sensing. I mean, I will not speak for everybody. You are going to find hatred in pockets everywhere in the world, and you are going to find people who are just not open to people from different backgrounds. However, I've heard more about people engaging with their Muslim neighbors. I've heard of, my husband is a lecturer at the university, and one of his PhD students is a fully veiled Muslim woman, and who's just moved down here in the last couple of months. And she says she has fears less going on the street fully veiled in Wellington than she's done in a lot of other cities around the world.
Wow, well, there you go.
So, I mean, there is more. I mean, we are not saints here. I'm not going to try to pretend we're something we're not.
Yeah.
But the whole thing of reaching out, that this whole they are us, adapted very quickly. No, we will not be defined by this, but we want to embrace that they are also us. That has a flip side, of course, with the Maori and Pacifica citizens who are saying, okay, where are we in this picture?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a lot more complex than you can just say, oh, this and this and this and this. But there is a dialogue, and there is more of a recognition that we do not want to be defined by hatred. We do not want that act to define who we are, which is why name suppression has been very, very important for New Zealanders who are very upset with other media outlets, including Australia outlets, who will name the perpetrator, where the theory here is, by not giving a name to this person, he will be forgotten.
Yeah, the notoriety. Yeah, you're basically denying him notoriety.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so it's a different way of dealing with such an atrocity. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine these recent shootings just not long ago in Texas in the US, and I think there was a second shooting just over one weekend, that must have sort of brought it all back in some ways for New Zealanders.
I think yes and no, but I think when New Zealanders are taking the action of liking it or not, but we've clamped down on access to guns and the likelihood, and people are saying, well, why can't they do it in the States? I mean, this is nothing new for them.
Yeah.
So I think that it goes both ways, doesn't it? Where we can feel empathy, but it's also, but if you're choosing to actually do nothing with the empathy, what are you actually empathetic about? What are you protecting? And is that kind of, I think, view of humanity that I find so intriguing.
Yeah, yeah. Now, look, you're saying, without doing something about it, and I think that's probably where it comes down to. I would definitely like to get, practical in our talk today.
Yes.
So can you tell me, how have churches in New Zealand, like including your local church or your Adventist denomination in Christchurch or across the nation of New Zealand, how did they respond to these Christchurch mosque attacks and to the community discussion and the media discussion that was created from those terrible tragic events?
I think for most people, really extended themselves. I mean, I know the ministers in Christchurch met with the mosque leaders, met with the imams, and they offered their not just condolences, but standing with them, next with them, and journeying with them. And I think the majority of Adventists and most other Christians are standing just not in sympathy, but also realizing that, it could have been us. We have some peculiar beliefs that people find a little bit interesting and different at times. And any group that kind of sticks a little bit out of the norm is...
they can be a target.
Yeah, they can. And so I was very impressed with my leadership here at the conference at the union level, who made comments, who made...
public
who stood up in
statements.
support of it, and I don't have them right here, so I can't read them.
No, that's fine. But they did, and I think a number of Adventist schools also.
We did, and I think what struck me was that several of our members. So we didn't do something as a church as such, but members got involved and reached out to their Muslim neighbors, and we saw here how people were like, well, if you don't want to walk alone, let me know, I'll come and walk with you. And particularly the women were reaching out to other women. And so we have one family who are renting out their house to a Muslim family. And they made sure that they visited them and supported them and just had that, community. So people have been more intentionally about being in community with people of the Muslim faith or of other minorities.
I guess some people might think, Kirsten, that this is Christians and churches are sort of jumping on some, I guess, sort of trendy, lefty bandwagon in making statements like this, being involved like this. They say, well, churches should be, focus on, singing hymns and having church services, not this sort of stuff. But I mean, is that a fair criticism? What does the Bible that Christians read actually say about how believers should treat foreigners? Does it even deal with that topic?
Oh, I think the Bible is super clear, and this is why I always am baffled when people who confess to be Christians are saying they don't want to reach out and be helpful, because the Bible is very clear about how we are to treat foreigners. And it says there already from the beginning, it's like, don't mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were a foreigner yourself.
Yeah,
you know how it feels to be a foreigner. Exodus 23 says, don't oppress foreigners. And in Leviticus, one of the first books in the Bible, it says there that a foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt, and I am the Lord your God.
Yeah, wow.
And for me, why would I not want to treat somebody from a different country the same? But I think this is where the world gets messed up, that we actually categorize people and think some are better than others. And the Bible is absolutely saying that is not the case. Ephesians in the New Testament says that consequently you are no longer foreigners or strangers. You are all fellow citizens with God's people and members of his household. And if everybody is my brother and sister in God's eyes, then how can I not reach out and engage with them? How can I not think that their humanity is as much worth as mine?
Wow.
And I think, it comes to, what do you see it? Is it in a nationalistic or in a, are you seeing the whole world as God's, or are you seeing just your blessed part as God's? And it's how do we view that? And I think it is easy to become insular. It is easy to focus on where we are and in our local environment. But God is challenging us to actually take it a step beyond, saying, look, I have created the whole earth. All of the earth is mine. It's all my people. I love everyone. He came to die for everyone, as he talks about. But I think, we can help and be practical. To come back to the practicality question, is sometimes we fear what we don't know. And when we see people of a different culture doing different things, we're like, oh, I don't know. We might not want to offend, but you know what? A smile will not offend anyone. A simple thing like a smile. Or I was in a supermarket some time ago with somebody who's not a believer, and this Asian student dropped something that spilled all over the supermarket. And people, we all people will snicker a little bit and laugh. And this woman, she realized this guy is petrified because he's done something and he thinks it's so horrible that she went over to him and said, no, don't worry. And she called over the staff and said, please clean this up. And said, no, you don't pick it up here. It's okay. And I'm thinking like, wow, a non-Christian could see that and be with somebody who were just, it was painful to see. And I'm thinking, like, what a lesson for us as believers.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to be that good neighbor in the supermarket where we are. And for those who really want to, make a difference, there are places like the Red Cross where you can sign up and volunteer and journey with a refugee family and help them, with a license and just, getting to grips with living a life in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think there are also, there are even programs involved where you can actually offer your granny flat or your spare room
Exactly.
or, to someone who's, I guess, transitioning into your country or to, migrant settlement services are all over the place to, help, recent migrants who've often come under refugee arrangements to settle in, to figure out, how to catch the bus and where do I get a table and chairs. And there are all sorts of practical things we can do.
I think it's looking for those, we're not all going to have space to have a refugee family in a granny flat if we don't have one.
Of course not. Yeah.
But we can all be practical also in how we shut down hate speech that we might be hearing, not engage in all these kind of really bad jokes, being it sexist or xenophobic or just, and just be helpful in the supermarket. You're seeing somebody struggling, it's like, can I help you? Never assume that just because you are from here, that you know everything.
Sure.
But going back to the whole Christian churches, I want to flip the question around is, if I don't want to help people who are fleeing to come to my country and in need, why would I want to go on a so-called mission trip to their country?
Yeah.
Let's be real. Let's build relationships where we are.
Yeah, that's right. That volunteerism, they call it sometimes. It's all very exotic to go to another country and help some poor people there. But what about the poor people in your own community, possibly even from the same country?
Yeah, but also if you want to go on a mission trip, that's fine. I actually like when you call it, ADRA in Northern Europe calls it solidarity trips.
Oh, right, okay.
So you're coming and you're working alongside a local community with whatever project it is as a solidarity. But not as you coming and teaching them another culture. But it comes down to, if I feel that this is my calling to be a Christian, to share who God is with communities somewhere else, why would I not do the same if that community came on my doorstep and asked me can I be your neighbor?
Yeah, will you be my neighbor? And that's it definitely comes from one of Jesus' stories of the Good Samaritan, doesn't it? And I guess something else that he said that really resonates with what you're saying is, what we call the golden rule. Do unto others whatever you would like them to do unto you. It's a basic principle that really does resonate in this topic, doesn't it?
It does. And I cannot see how we as Christians, if we confess to be Christians, can get away with an attitude of not wanting welcoming people.
Yeah.
The lesser of those who are struggling. And I think this is, as I write in my article, it really struck me home when I went to our National Museum and I realized that New Zealand had actually the first refugee group, because New Zealand is a new country. And I think, everybody has arrived to New Zealand, and that's different from a lot of other places where you have indigenous population, where we as white Europeans came and then afterwards, and now we are being discriminatory to those who are coming after us. That's a whole different discussion. But New Zealand is a new country. Everybody has arrived here one way. I mean, our Maori citizens are talking about the wakas they came on, and those are really important stories. But when I then see that the first refugee group that was welcomed to New Zealand was that from Denmark, it just struck a chord in me. And I think that's also what inspired me to write the piece, because if I, who are in a privileged position today, have a history going back to 1860s, which is not that long ago, where my people were standing at the door knocking and asking, can I please come and be your neighbor because it is not safe to live where I am? How can I turn around and close the door?
To someone in the same sort of need, yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. No, that's a really great challenge. And yeah, thanks so much for writing the article, and thanks so much for being a part of Signs of the Times Radio today, Kirsten.
Well, you're welcome. I hope it made a little bit of sense.
Yes. Thanks. All right. God bless.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.